So I'm going to talk about Heritrix's REST API. So yes, for anyone still on Heritrix 1, it's not in Heritrix 1. It is, however, in Heritrix 3 and really rather useful. For anyone who's used Heritrix 3, the API is laid out very much like the web interface. If there's a button on a page, there's a function in the API for that button, and the URL of the page is probably the URL you want. That's pretty much how it works. It's a way of programmatically accessing Heritrix over HTTPS. So any client that you can use HTTPS with, whether it's curl, whether you use Python library or Java, whatever your preference, you can use it. So yes, everything's just a post with one exception, which is a put. But by and large, it's not overly complicated. Again, if you've seen the Heritrix 3 interface and you're familiar with the buttons, they're all functions in the API. So, a bit more of an example. How do we use it? Let me scroll down. So we have, in addition to the domain crawl, we do a lot of more frequent crawls. So for instance, every Friday at 9, we crawl 400 newspaper websites. And every day we crawl the BBC, that kind of thing. So we use this to schedule it. There's a cron job that runs every hour, and it uses the API to stop, pause, and launch new jobs. Now I'm actually going to run a job in the back, quick thing in the background, because at 1 o'clock there's something supposed to run, and I've prevented it running just to show you. If I could see the screen. There we go. Right. So it's actually there's a script that's running. This uses the API. I'm just going to let it run in the background. And go back to my slides. So for us, as I say, every hour we have a separate system which our curators input into. So they can add any URL they want, any host, and they can put in details they want about it. Whether they just want to annotate it, they can specify a schedule, whether it's daily, weekly, monthly, and they can change certain rules like whether or not to obey robots, well, and a few other things, which depth, that kind of thing, and yes.
Can I put exclusions in as well?
Not yet, but that could be done. So we use that as the basis for our frequent crawls. So firstly, if it's daily, we check to see whether or not there's a job that's already running. So if it's daily, there probably is. The BBC is quite big, we're not going to crawl it in 24 hours. If it is, we pause it. Again, if you're familiar with I'm just going to embarrass myself further. So yes, anyone unfamiliar with Heritrix 3, that's the Heritrix 3 web interface for a particular job. The buttons across the top are the ones you use to stop, pause, that kind of thing. And that's pretty much the API order. So we would, if there's a job already running, which this one is, we would, firstly we pause it, then we empty the frontier to make sure that we can, so that's for a different reason. But then essentially we terminate, tear down, and then spin up the next one. Yes. So yeah, going back to something someone was saying earlier about the importing of Spring config within Spring. We do something similar, but we don't actually use Spring for it. With the API, you can submit an existing CXML file, or you can create the job directory as is, which is what we do, and then use the add function to add that directory to Heritrix and then use that to run your job. We keep our profiles together, but we have an external XML file which has all our exclusions and sheets in, and then we use XML'sxinclude to import them into the existing CXML, and then we copy that to the job directory along with the seeds and the static exclusions. And then it's just a matter, again, of, via the API, hitting the build button, crossing our fingers, and hitting launch. Similarly, as I say, we have this curated set of URIs, and for the particularly complicated things, we either use sheets, which are in the CXML, or we use the scripting console. And you can also access the scripting console via the API. Essentially, you post the contents of the script to Heritrix, and it's just the same as running it. Very powerful, very dangerous.
Did you do it?
Do you have any examples of how to manage the frontier queue?
Do I? In what sense, manage?
Empty.
Yes, kind of. Bear with me. Okay, so as I said, you can use any language you want. So there was an earlier existing library wrapper written in Python that hasn't been updated in a few years, which I forked and played with and added a couple of things. One of which was empty frontier. That is the script. So if you used curl, you would merely be posting that. Script equals that string. So yeah, anything you can do in the scripting console, you can do here.
That's not exactly the same thing to do unless you pause the crawl.
Yes, that is the. As I said, we pause the crawl, then we empty the frontier. Don't do it on the running one.
What would happen
What
if
would
you don't
happen
pause the job first?
Find out.
I think we corrupt the BDB database because it's not thread safe in that way, so it'll just go. And then your crawl will die.
Then it would probably be a good idea to have a sort of collect these scripts somewhere. Maybe
Is there a?
There's a page on the
Yes.
This is a
search for Heritrix useful scripts.
Yep. There is. We have one on our internal wiki, which then links to this one, which I think. If I could type, it would help.
I should do it
Yeah.
now. Yeah.
On the Internet Archives page,
this is already happening.
which contain a lot of things. They're, in the scripting console, you can either use JavaScript, Groovy, Bean Shell, I think another one. So yes, there's a lot of useful things there.
Minor note of caution, there's been occasional API changes between point releases, which breaks some scripts sometimes, so you might have to, but it's rare, it has happened, so just say.
Might want to test them first. before-
Yeah,
Yes.
just test them on a test thing.
But as we mentioned earlier, when you give a bean an ID and use the dot syntax to reference a method, that's how you use the scripting console. That's how you refer to beans and things. So if there are API changes, then yeah, that should be reflected there. Okay. So more verbosely than I planned, the script I ran, again, it uses the API. we have the daily 1 o'clock job has stopped and restarted.
How's that?
Yeah, the value error is actually one of our curators who put in a wrong URL, and it always throws that error.
Is it worth explaining the stuff people might be vaguely interested in the JSON payload?
Yeah, as part of the script, we just generate stats on a per host basis, response code and data size, and then we pass that back to the curators for them to review, including things that have reached the cap, so they can then adjust the cap settings if they want to.
So do you have then like a script call that's daily, every hour, every hour, and that's your reference point for starting and stopping, or
It's
you're
just
talking about 900 hours, and that one was 1300 hours?
Yes, they run every hour, and the naming convention involves the hour they're supposed to run.
Ah, okay, right.
That's-
It doesn't
yeah.
care about day, it just cares about hours. Do you have like a day component to it? So
so the daily ones only care about the hour because they run every day. The weekly ones do care about the day of the week.
Okay.
So then,
another slice of
yeah.
the same.
So I think it's weekly Tuesday 0200 or something.
Right.